So, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Real Talk about JA and Emotional Health, Balance and Boundaries webinar. My name is Kerry Spichiger, and I am a pediatric nurse practitioner. I currently live in Philly, and I work at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. I am also an arthritis patient. I have been living with JIA for 25 years now. I have been involved with the Arthritis Foundation in many ways, including volunteering at JA camps and JA conferences. This will be my second year organizing the young adult programming for the JA conference. And in July, I'll be heading back to Orlando, Florida to reunite with my arthritis family. So I was diagnosed at only 2 years old. Arthritis has been a part of my life for as long as I can remember. I know firsthand how tough emotionally, physically, and mentally growing up with arthritis and navigating life as a young adult with a chronic illness can be. As an adult, I have suffered from mental health issues related to my chronic illness that I originally did not even recognize as such. I, like so many others, did not know why I was feeling the way that I did and had no idea that others suffer with similar struggles. That's why I'm so excited about tonight's webinar. Our guest expert will help us all understand how to better manage our negative emotions and set boundaries with friends, family, and coworkers for our mental health. Before we begin, let's watch a short video about the Insights program so you can understand how to make your voice heard and help the foundation create more programs just like this one.
By taking part in the Live Yes Insights assessment, you help change lives today, including your own. And you help change the future of arthritis. It takes just 10 minutes or less to share your experience and make a difference. Answer simple questions, like how often you felt arthritis pain in the last week. Ongoing insights data from people like you will lead to new resources that ease daily life. Your insights show what kind of support you need in your community. You improve the healthcare system. You focus researchers and others on top priorities. You'll make more research funding possible, leading to new groundbreaking treatments. The power is in your hands to change things now and for the future. This is your opportunity to change the future of arthritis.
Great. So a few housekeeping notes for tonight's event. We have muted all attendees for this event, but you can direct any questions you may have to the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. We'll also reserve time to answer your questions at the end of the presentation. After this presentation, you'll also receive an email asking about your experience. These surveys help us track the success of these sessions and better plan for future events. So please take the time to fill it out. Let's get started. I am pleased to introduce our expert tonight, Jessica Oslander. She is a mental health professional working in private practice in Charlotte, North Carolina. Dr. Auslander works with clients and families affected by chronic health issues and addiction-related disorders. As a JA parent and patient herself, she has served as a subject matter expert on arthritis and mental health for the Arthritis Foundation's Live Yes online community. She has also served on several local Arthritis Foundation committees and has been a member of the JA Conference Planning Committee since 2016. Dr. Auslander, welcome, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Kerry. Thank you, everyone. Hello. So my name's Dr. Auslander. Call me Jessica. Some of you may have seen me in conference or see me in different webinars already, so it's really great to virtually see everybody. Yes, Kerry mentioned that, not only am I, a PhD and a mental health counselor working with people with chronic health issues, I was a JA kid before biologics. I've been through quite a bit in my own treatment journey. I first had symptoms at 8. Didn't get a correct diagnosis until 35. So I grew up with a lot of unknowns and a lot of ups and downs, and had my own fair share of mental health issues, particularly in high school and college, because we couldn't get a diagnosis and didn't understand what was really going on with me. And then I became a JA mom. My oldest, Jaden, has spondy, just like I do. So I've also gone through this journey as a JA parent. So I'm really excited to be able to give back and talk about a topic I'm so passionate about. So first, I want to touch on some mental health myths, right? There's a lot of myths and stigma about mental health, particularly when it comes to chronic illness, but especially when it comes to autoimmune. So the number one thing I hear is that people tell me it's all in my head. There's a big connection between the medical side of autoimmune disorders and depression and anxiety. And this isn't just, we know this from our lived experience. This has actually been backed up with quite a bit of research in the last 10 to 20 years. The thinking used to be, because you're in pain, because you can't do things other people can do, that's why you're upset. That's why you're anxious. Not really. We know that the way the immune system functions, that same blood flow that carries all of those antibodies through our body goes through our brain. So when we have symptoms like brain fog, for example, and the fatigue and feeling just kind of like muddy up there, it's actually the impact of the immune system on the brain. There's some emerging research in psychiatry that's actually reconceptualizing depression as having possible inflammatory or autoimmune causes. So it's kind of interesting. I've been kind of keeping my eye on that research because when someone says, oh, it's just in your head, oh, you're worrying too much, or, oh, get over it. It's actually a medical issue. We know depression and anxiety, yes, it can be caused by worrying too much or bad experiences or not knowing how to cope with day-to-day stuff. Okay, fine. A low-grade depression and anxiety can come from just our life experience. But we also know that moderate to severe depression and anxiety actually has medical basis in brain structure and brain chemistry, and autoimmune disease plays a role in that. So when you are flaring and feeling foggy and feeling heavy or feeling really on edge and irritable, it's not just you reacting or not being able to deal with what's going on. It's actually the imbalance going on between your body and brain. So it's not just in your head, it's in the rest of your body too. I should be able to cope with this. I grew up with it. I said this to myself a lot. I grew up with this. What is my problem? Why can't I just deal with this? I was having, I've had symptoms since age 8, in and out of remission kind of spontaneously. And then I'm 42 now, so my mid-30s, it really woke up and attacked me. And I didn't understand why it was a problem. Why can't I just deal with this? I grew up with it. Well, the thing is, the brain grows too. So right, the age that most of you are, this kind of 18 to 22, you're at the end of adolescence. Adolescence goes from 10 to 22-ish. So if you're between the ages of 18 and 22, your brain and your body are kind of in this last push for development. So this means a lot of changes in hormones, which are just chemicals that tell parts of the body what to do. Changes in, physical growth. You can still have a growth spurt. Man, I grew an inch in grad school. You would have thought I won the lottery. I was so excited because I was less short. Loved it. But the brain from 24 or from 22 to about 24, 25, 26, it goes through one final growth spurt. And what's happening to the brain, if this is your brain, it's kind of getting this final coating, this final neuronal sheathing of basically nerves to help the whole brain communicate with itself. So it's not uncommon between 18 and 25, 26 to have breakthrough incidences of things like depression, anxiety. We also see first episode psychoses, addiction, things like that are biologically based mental health disorders are more likely to present in this last push for development, just because the brain's not done yet. The brain's still growing. This is why, fun fact, if you're still on your parents' health insurance, this is why legally you can be until the age of 26, because we know the brain isn't done yet, and there's a lot of psychiatric needs still in this window. And the brain's not done at 26. It still changes and grows and develops all through our lifespan, just like the rest of our body. But we don't think about it because we don't see it. So it's okay. This idea, I should be able to cope with this just because I grew up with it. Your brain's still growing too. It's okay to have natural ups and downs with these things. I can't afford mental health care. Mental health care is medical care. One of the benefits we have seen the last couple of years is this push to really treat it financially at the same level as medical care. So, we'll get into healthcare options a little bit later, but if you have benefits through an employer, through a parent's employer, maybe through school or wherever you're accessing your benefits, take another look, because especially last year and this year, we're seeing more resources being available in terms of free or reduced cost mental health care, or a wider variety of mental health care options on these medical plans. So seeing a counselor is treated, the claims treated the same way as if you see your primary care, if you see your specialist. So that myth that that you can't afford it, it's too expensive, there are actually a lot of really accessible options out there. So one of the biggest issues we have is balance, right? Especially living with autoimmune and, living with arthritis disorders. The connection between our emotional experiences and inflammation, fatigue, and perception of pain can be like this teeter-totter. So, as you probably have experienced before, if you're in a flare, we don't feel good. We might feel irritable. We might feel tired. We might feel really stressed, and the stress is kind of feeding the flare, but then the flare is causing the stress, right? This back and forth dialogue. So it's really important to keep this idea of balance in mind, balancing what we're thinking, what we're feeling, and what we're doing. Some forms of arthritis, you may need to rest more. Other forms, you may feel that activity, is better. It's striking this balance, but understanding that the way the brain is experiencing that inflammation and that fatigue and how we're perceiving pain can feed into our emotions, and vice versa. The brain's connected to the rest of the body. So when we look at, okay, how do we achieve this balance? One of the approaches I like to use is really leaning on reflection to develop that insight. So with the age that you're going through now, with this 18 to 24, 26 age range, guess what? This is already a developmental task that your brain's focusing on. This is where a lot of us kind of start to gain that insight and that perspective and start to really be able to reflect on ourselves. So your brain is already starting to do this naturally and get better at this. One approach you may have heard of is mindfulness. And mindfulness is not full-on meditation, right? We hear a lot of, mindfulness or mindfulness meditation apps. Mindfulness is simply being present in the moment and observing yourself and noticing yourself, but not judging, just kind of letting it go. So it could be as simple as checking in with yourself. So for example, this evening when I returned to my office to do this webinar, I kind of checked in with myself and said, okay, where am I right now? I'm actually on day 6 of a flare. And when I sat down on my desk chair and kind of centered myself and went, you know what? Everything hurts too much. I'm on my own couch in my therapy office, so I'm sure there's a joke in there. So I decided in that moment, you know what? It's not going to be worth me being distracted or irritated by my pain. I'm going to move to my comfy couch. So it's just a matter of taking a minute to just check in with yourself, noticing, observing your thoughts, your feelings. How does your body feel? And just taking that information and sitting with it and not judging, not letting your mind run away with, oh my gosh, I shouldn't feel this way. Or I can't do this. I should just give up. No, you just sit with it and go, yep, accept it. This is who I am right now. Now that I have this information, what's my next step? So for me tonight, it's like, you know what? I'm going to grab a second cup of coffee and I'm going to sit on the comfy couch. And that's how I took care of myself in that minute. And it only takes a minute. The other approach I like is more of a solution-focused approach. So if the mindfulness is not something that you're comfortable with, or you need a little bit more, the solution-focused approach is more structured. So it's going to be pulling in more into that analytical cognitive part of your brain than the feeling part of your brain. And either one's okay. One's not better than the other. So the solution-focused approach is identifying the problem. The problem may not be what you think it is. It could be something underlying. So you have to sit with it for a second and figure out the problem. Is the problem the actual pain? Is the problem the fact that you feel bad because you had to cancel a social event? Is the problem that you had to call into work? Or is the problem how you're emotionally reacting to these events that may be out of your control? So you identify the problem and you think, okay, what have I tried so far? When I've been in this situation, because if you've grown up with arthritis, or even if you're newly diagnosed, It takes a while to get diagnosed sometimes. You probably have tried a few things. So you figure out, okay, let me go through the list. What have I tried so far? Okay, given that, I wonder if I brainstorm, what else can I think of to try? What are some new options, some new alternatives? Maybe reaching out, what have other people have tried? Looking at what other people have tried, looking at the Arthritis Foundation website, some of these groups and things we'll talk about later, reaching out to a community. What are some other ideas out there? Get a list of what can I try next? And then once you try it, you want to come back and monitor how it's going. So if I take my situation tonight, what is the problem? The problem isn't that my back hurts. That's a regular occurrence. The problem is I'm concerned I'm going to be distracted by that pain. What have I tried so far? Well, in my entire work day today, I've been in my nice supportive orthopedic chair. I've been moving. I've been stretching. Hasn't really, helped. What else can I try? I can try my comfy couch propped up with my pillows, right? Okay, I'm going to try that. What's next? How's it going? Well, I'm pretty comfortable. I'm pretty focused. So I think I've got my solution. So going through this step-by-step solution-focused approach is a way you can get that balance, because as you're trying to figure out what the problem is or reflect on what you've tried so far or what you could try next, you might figure out that, wait a second, this isn't the problem, that's the problem. It's not that it's my arthritis, it's actually maybe a social situation that's stressing me out. So it's you can figure out where you're out of balance just by kind of going through these steps to try to solve the problem. Well-being. This is one of my favorite topics because I think many people have great intentions, right? But emotional wellness does not look like toxic positivity. It is not good vibes only type thinking. I know that's on like every t-shirt right now and every coffee mug. No, thank you. We are not looking at this toxic positivity. We're not forcing ourselves just to push through it, just to be fine, right? Just to, put a smile on our face and move on. No, that's not realistic. And it may not even happen depending on the severity of the autoimmune. If your immune system's kicking off, your brain is not going to be receptive to this approach. So when we look at well-being and emotional wellness, it's not, am I positive? It's not, am I not feeling any negative emotions? What emotional wellness actually looks like is acceptance and neutrality. So going back to the mindfulness idea or the solution focused, can I just accept where I am in the moment without judgment? Can I go to a more neutral place? So instead of saying, okay, my back's not going to cooperate tonight, it's going to distract me. Instead of saying, you know what, I'm just going to push through and put a smile on my face and pretend it's not happening. No, I'm going to accept, all right, day 6 of a flare, my back's still crunchy. I can't hope for no pain, but you know what? I'm going to be neutral and I'm going to remind myself that I can do this. I can be focused. I've got my comfy couch. So it's going to this place of neutrality versus this toxic positivity. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay to just get through the day and get to the finish line at the end of your day and go, wow, look at everything I did today. I put one foot in front of the other, and that's enough for today. That is okay. People who have that mindset are actually more mentally healthy than this over positive, pull myself up on my bootstraps, I can do anything I want to mentality. I know we've got this, one of the phrases, we're JA warriors. Yes, we're warriors, but sometimes we feel like putting down, the armor, and sometimes we feel like taking a break from it, and that's okay too. So emotional wellness is really, can you get to this place of acceptance? You don't have to like it, right? Acceptance is not being completely okay with what's going on, but just accepting it and that, okay, this is what's happening. I'm not going to get down on myself. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to be aware of my limits and my boundaries. And it's okay to take a break and not be okay for a day. It's okay if the best that your mood gets is neutral. It's okay if you have a day where you're just irritated the whole day. That's fine, as long as it's not happening every day for months. So when you think of wellness and well-being, you'll see a lot of stuff out there. Social media really kind of counteracts a lot of this because they put out a lot of, people put out a lot of messages on how they want to be seen, not how they truly are. So we do see a lot of messaging around well-being that it's actually this toxic positivity. And we want to back away from that and be in a more real space. So when we look at individual wellness, it really encompasses different areas of life that may be important to you. So everyone is going to define wellness a little bit differently. And even in the research literature, different, psychologists and counselors and social workers will define wellness differently because it's really individualized. So these are just some of the areas of wellness that we look at. We look at physical wellness, right? Just the medical piece of it, how I feel in my body. So not just, okay, what did my markers say on my last blood test? How many joints are inflamed right now? No. How do you feel in your body? Do you feel confident in your body? Do you feel comfortable? Emotional wellness, the spiritual wellness, your connection to a higher power, your connection, how you see your place in the universe. That's really the definition of spirituality. It's separate from religion. Some people for that it's combined, for others it's two separate entities. When we talk from a psychological standpoint of well-being, we're really talking about that spirituality. How are you connecting with others? Social wellness. So who's in your group? Where are your relationships? There's no right or wrong with that. Some people are more comfortable with smaller groups of people. Some need a wider net. Social wellness actually involves varying degrees of relationships and intimacy within those relationships. So we look at social wellness in a larger scale than most people think. Financial wellness. This time of year, it always hits because we're kind of in between like deductibles and copays resetting, right? And tax returns. So financial wellness is a big topic this time of year. We want to include that in when we're doing a wellness evaluation because finances could be stressful. And then occupational wellness. This is a big, a big issue in this developmental stage because wherever you are in school, training, career, young professional, this occupational well-being is really at the forefront of a lot of people's minds right now. So we incorporate that. We look at overall well-being. So if you're trying to assess your own mental health and balance and stress level, take a look at this list. And there could be other topics that are important for you to add to it. And then you can kind of gauge where you are in your well-being and all of these different areas and see how it adds up. You may be really stressed about one area, but when you sit and think about it, like, oh, I'm actually more stable there, or I've met my goals there. I'm really concerned about this over here. So when we look at wellness, we look at balance in these different areas. Social well-being. So this is one of the, I think, more crucial topics, not just for young adults, really for everyone, but letting go of this idea that you're damaged goods or you're old for your age, right? I heard this a lot. I even had a rheumatologist when I was 33, 34, tell me he didn't know what to do with me because all of his other patients were 30 years older than me. I'm like, is this happening right now? I'm in my 30s and being called old for my age. I guess I should have been glad, right? I got rid of that doctor quickly, but this idea that arthritis makes us too old for our age, that we can't keep up with our peers, it's actually not true because when you look at it, everyone's got ups and downs. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. It just happens to be ours. But this idea that we're damaged goods, autoimmune disorders are more common than people think. When people, would question me or criticize me or kind of look down on me, I'm like, hey, I found mine. You haven't found yours yet. I know what my challenges are. Just wait till you get yours. I'm just going to be ahead of the game, right? You find ways to kind of come back at people because you don't want to accept this idea, that we're damaged or we have this like old person's disease, right? So in terms of having these social interactions, boundaries are super important. Now, as we go through, kind of adolescence, around 15, 16, boundaries get really hard because the part of our brain that analyzes things like body language and facial expressions goes through a growth spurt. So we kind of lose that idea of how to interpret other people's meaning. So our boundaries tend to go down because we just want to be accepted. We just want to be liked. So this is where a lot of adolescents will overshare. right? We'll talk too much. We'll tell everybody what's going on. And then we kind of get that, awkward, or we may feel like we're kind of scaring people off, right? So it's important to decide where your boundaries should be and how to negotiate that a little bit. So once you decide where your boundaries are, especially when it comes to discussing health issues, who needs to know? Who do you want to know? You may want certain people to know because you have a good bond with them and you want them to be a support person. And there's others that you may not really want to tell just yet, and that's okay. One of my husband's favorite stories to tell about me at conference, the dad's group that he helps out with, was that we met in college. I was 17. I was a freshman at Bowling Green State University. He was a junior. And our dorms had a combination of electronic lock and then a manual key to get in the unlock the doorknob. And we had just gone on a date. It was early in our relationship, and we were heading back to my room to grab something, and I couldn't get the key to turn. And when I got the key to turn, I couldn't grab the doorknob to turn it. And then I dropped the key, and then I got flustered. And he picked up the key, he opened the door, and he walked in, and I've got my back to him because I am red. I am trying not to cry. I didn't want to explain this, all of this. And I turn around and he looks at me and goes, "So how long have you had arthritis?" And I was floored. I was not planning to tell him that. I was supposed to be invincible. I was 17-year-old college freshman. He has a cousin with spondy. So he saw through, what I was trying to do to manage and hide the fact I couldn't open a door. But he saw right through that, was like, "Hey, so how long have you had arthritis? Let's talk about it." And it was really humbling to me in the moment that I thought that I couldn't share that. And then I realized, you know what? We're friends. We've been together for, I should be able to be comfortable with that. But it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, and that's okay. This is your personal story, your personal information. It's a need-to-know basis. You don't have to justify, explain, or excuse anything you need, period. You open the interactions on your terms. So if this means you're super tired and, you're meeting a friend for coffee, or you're going out to dinner, or you're having a conversation on the phone, it's okay to say at the outset, "Hey, I'm so glad to see you. Just a heads up, I only have like a half an hour." You don't have to explain why. You don't have to explain the spoon theory story. You don't have to say that you're really tired. You don't have to say, "Yeah, I totally walked into Starbucks, looked at that wooden chair and said, ooh, ow, no." You don't have to go into any of that. You can just say, "Hey, I love seeing, just real quick, I just want to let you know I got about 30 minutes. And you can set those boundaries. And by taking charge, you're setting those interactions up to be on your terms. Again, you don't have to explain, but then at that half an hour, if you still want to leave or end the interaction, you can, because you very politely set that boundary and let them know what to expect. Accepting invitations on your terms. So someone asks you to go out, right? Or someone is inviting themselves over, and it's kind of this, "Yeah, maybe, I'm not sure." You can do the same thing you do when you open the interaction. You can accept it, but modify it to work for you. "Yeah, that sounds great, but I got an early morning. I got to be home by 10. It doesn't matter if you have an early morning or not, right? You just may want to be in your jammies by 10. That's totally fine. It's okay to accept those invitations, but set your terms. Let someone know ahead of time what your limits are, so there's no, surprise later. You're not anxious or distracted for the whole interaction, wondering how to get out of something, because you've let them know ahead of time, "Hey, these are the boundaries, of the time I can spend or what I can do." It's completely fine. "Hey, we're going to go do this, that, some physical activity. Oh, that sounds like so much fun. I'd love to watch you," instead of participating, right? If you don't feel like participating, or "I'll give it a try. I've never done it before. I'm going to last 10 minutes doing that." Whatever it is, and play it off. You don't have to explain and offer up all of these details. And you can invite people in. So we talk about this concept of who do you let into your world. It can be very selective, and again, on your terms. You can have one or two people that you feel you've built that trust in, that you can invite them in and say, "Hey, can I tell you a little bit what this is like for me, or can I explain why X, Y, Z?" And if they're interested and they're really engaged and you get that positive vibe from them, Share the details, let people in, invite people into this world that we have so they can help you when you need it. It's okay. We tend to push people out. We want to have that brave face, right? Build that wall up so no one knows how we struggle. But we can only do that for so long. We need to be able to invite people in on a selective basis so we can be authentically ourselves, right? We can only keep that mask on for so long. When my husband, now husband, then boyfriend, called me out on my arthritis at 17, after that date, I just remember going back to my room and just losing it, right? He kind of took my mask off. But then I realized the benefit of kind of inviting him in, because then he felt closer to me and he felt good about being able to help me on certain things. So other people get a benefit from helping us. So when we say, no, I'm good, when we really need the help, we're also kind of taking away someone else's opportunity to help us and get closer to us. So think of who you've invited in, or who you'd like to invite into this world. And don't be afraid to plan activities around your life, not the lives of others. It can be really easy to get swept up in kind of the group or get swept up in someone else's calendar and accept all these invites. It's okay to set activities around your situation. I used to host like board game nights and things like that, things that were very much in activities where I could sit on my couch, eat when I felt like eating, right? Be near the bathroom when I needed it, and not have to worry about driving somewhere or going out. I would plan these events that were kind of around my ability level at the time. And it was a way I could connect with people. And most of them didn't even know about my diagnosis. So it's okay to take control socially and plan things that work for you and invite people to come do things that you enjoy. We tend to assume, that people aren't going to want to kind of be in this boat with us. But the arthritis piece doesn't have to be a barrier. Just as you would share interests with friends, plan activities around your life and then invite people to them. It's a way to kind of have some empowerment and reset your boundaries when it comes to social things. Another area, involving boundaries we really have to look at is those personal relationships, right? Close friends, intimate partners, things like that. And if we're in these relationships, these situations, and you start to feel like you're not being heard, your needs aren't being met, if they're dismissing, being dismissive of the medical piece, first we educate, right? Not everyone understands this, especially if they don't think that young people can have arthritis or autoimmune disorders. We want to first give them a chance to, be educated and explain it. If they don't have that empathy and they're not willing to see your side, that might be a sign that it's time to adjust the boundaries on that relationship. Because as you know, this isn't something that's going to change, right? This is part of the package. And if they're not going to meet you where you are on that, on an issue that's kind of fundamental because it's a medical issue, it makes you wonder, where are they going to be on other issues? And are they going to be a safe person for you if you need to get some support? So a question I often get asked is, okay, what do I do with friendships that might be going sideways or, relationships? This is also kind of an age and a developmental stage, this 18 to 26, where relationships naturally shift and we start to kind of outgrow people and we outgrow different roles and different types of relationships we need. And that's okay. It's actually really normal. We think of, breaking up with a friend as this thing we should avoid and it's bad, but we don't want toxic people in our lives. That's going to increase our stress level, right? It's going to make it worse. But people don't realize it's actually normal to outgrow people in relationships. Think back to who your friends were in kindergarten, right? They were probably just a matter of geography. Who was in your class? Who was your next door neighbor, right? Who did you go to camp with or go to daycare with, right? That's how our friendships develop as children. As we move towards adulthood, our needs change. The roles people play in our lives change. It's okay for that to fluctuate. It's okay for people to drift away. It's okay for you to break up with people and push them away. It's not a bad thing. It's actually really normal and really healthy. Going back to that idea of just acceptance. If you've drifted apart from a friend, or maybe they're having a hard time coping, kind of dealing with the fact that you can't live life on the same page as they are, you drift apart, that's all right. I reconnected with a friend from preschool. We'd gone through all of elementary, middle, and high school together. And we kind of had a falling out at one point. And, fast forward, 20 years, she was diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos and reached out to me. And she's like, I now completely understand why you had that year in high school where you were super moody and sad. I am so sorry, because that's me right now. And now we're super close again. So you never know, with the relationships, when we cut people out, it doesn't mean it's forever. It feels like it at the time. But it's okay to be a little more selective in those boundaries with individuals, because it's just a normal part of development anyway, and something we need to watch for that balance and that well-being. So this is one of my favorite communication tools. This is called Dear Man. It came from a therapy called dialectical behavioral therapy, or DBT. So if you want to pull this up later or find a different graphic, because this is presented lots of different ways, you can Google Dear Man and the letters DBT after it. And if you go to Google Images, you'll get all kinds of cute posters with this. But Dear Man is an acronym. That's a great way to structure communication. And the first step is describe. So you describe the situation. So an example might be, describing, someone wants to go out, you want to stay in. So you can say, hey, thanks for inviting me. I know that you want to go out. You want to go out to dinner tonight. Then you express your feelings. I'm concerned, I'm just kind of tired. Then you assert what you need. How about we order in and we stay in instead? Then you reinforce. So then you explain to the person why it's a good deal for them. Hey, if we do this, then we stay in, I'm going to rest, I'm going to feel better. We get takeout so we can still eat food from the place you want to go to. It's a win-win, right? So you describe the situation, you've expressed your feelings about it, you've asserted what you need, and then you reinforce, you tie it all in as to why the person should agree with you. The man part is we stay mindful, we appear confident, and we negotiate if needed. So the mindful is you stay on the situation that's in the moment. A lot of times when we're trying to talk to somebody, we may be thinking about past conflict, past conversations. If it's a situation that's come up, repeatedly, we might be trying to pull in every example from everything that's ever happened. We don't want to do that. That's not helpful. We want to stay mindful and present and focused on just the issue at hand. Appearing confident. We can get so far with body language because our brain really interprets that with just as much, or if not a little bit more weight than what our actual words are. So the brain takes in facial expression, body language, tone, pitch, speed of speech, all of these things. So we want to appear confident. So when we appear confident, our chin is up, we're looking at the person, not staring them down aggressively, right? An appropriate amount of eye contact. Our shoulders are kind of up, back, and down. Our chest is up a little bit. Our arms are down and relaxed. I like kind of the Wonder Woman or the Superman pose, right? We're standing up and we've got our fists on our hips. That's the kind of upper carriage. The reason that is so powerful, and we associate that with a superhero, is that projects confidence. So you don't have to suddenly square up to the person and be like, I think we should stay in tonight. But you want to make sure your body language isn't contradicting what you're saying. We don't want to look down. We don't want to be, avoiding eye contact or making ourselves physically smaller, right? Don't make yourself smaller to fit somebody else. Just appear relaxed and confident while you're having this conversation. And then if needed, know where you can negotiate. So you can, you're in the moment, you're expressing all this, you look confident saying it. They might say, okay, I hear you, but. So just know ahead of time where your boundaries are, where you can negotiate and where you don't want to negotiate, you want to hold that boundary. So if you look up Dear Man, you can get different explanations and get more into it. This is really just scratching the surface, but I wanted to introduce this because this is a communication technique I use with pretty much all of my chronic pain and arthritis patients, because it can get really tough to communicate. When we are tired, when we're flared, we don't want to explain it again. We don't want to hear ourselves say, I can't, right? We don't want to go through this for the 17th time that I'm tired and I don't feel well. This is a way to structure that communication. So it's actually less effort once you get the hang of it, but it's also communicating your boundary very clearly to the other person. So spend some time with this, look this up. It's a neat trick once you get in the swing of it. So another question I often get, is when do I need to get help? Do I need help? How am I going to know? So we look through, we kind of look for some key things. The first question I ask someone, is this a normal reaction to what you're experiencing? So if you think about it, okay, I'm really sad today. I'm really irritable, kind of cranky, like I'm just in a bad mood. Well, is it a normal reaction to what I'm experiencing? Well, my back has been hurting for 6 days straight now. Yeah, I kind of should be cranky. Like, this is normal to be cranky. I don't have time for this, right? So we kind of ask ourselves, okay, is this normal? It's just a reaction. Who else has gone through this, right? Do I know people that have gone through this? Have I gone through this before? Yeah, I know about day 4 is when I start to get cranky with my back. I'm on day 6. So this is a normal reaction. I've been through this before. I know in a couple days I'm going to feel better. Would I expect a different reaction? If you're in pain, would you expect yourself to be like happy and chipper and relaxed and easygoing? No. So the first layer is, hey, is this just a normal reaction? The second level is, okay, it's a normal reaction, but it's hitting me a little hard. Do I just need a little time, space, support to adjust? This is also incredibly normal. The brain actually has its own healing process too. So say, for example, you get, let's say you get laid off from your job, right? You lose your job. That's a shock. That is a traumatic thing. That's a crisis moment. Maybe it's unexpected. Oh my gosh, of course you're going to have a lot of feelings. You go through the normal reaction, right? But it's a little heavier than just that. Do I need a little more time, space, or support? Yeah, probably. Anytime we go through something that is a surprise, it doesn't have to be traumatic. It doesn't have to be, a big loss or anything like that. Anything that kind of takes us off guard or has a significant impact on us, the way it hits the brain, I kind of compare it to a bruise. The brain has its own healing process. So even people that have been through a critical event, say they've been in a car accident, we don't even talk to them from a mental health standpoint to anywhere from 24 to 72 hours after the fact, after a critical incident, because the brain has to start its own healing process. So we don't intervene right away. And this surprises people. But if I intervene too quickly, I could be doing more harm than good. So you can ask yourself, okay, if it's a normal reaction and it's taking more than a couple days, it's okay if something happens and you just need time or space, or maybe a specific type of support. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. It doesn't mean you're to the point of diagnosis yet. It's because the brain needs its own time, and resources to heal. In the diagnostic manual that we use in mental health called the DSM-5, a lot of the diagnoses, when we talk about length of time, we can't even diagnose people until it's been several days, several weeks, or even months for some of the diagnoses, because we acknowledge that the brain needs to just recover and do its own thing. Just as if I got hit and got a bruise on my arm, it would be pretty ugly for a few days, but the pain would eventually go away and I could move my arm again. Same thing with the brain. Something happens, adrenaline's released, kind of throws everything off. It's normal that the brain has to go through its healing process. So for those first two, peer support, social support, self-care will get you through. The third level, is this a barrier to my ability to live my life? If we're now at the point that something is completely overwhelming your ability to cope and function, then professional support may be needed. So we look at, okay, if you're feeling kind of low, if you're feeling kind of anxious, that's normal for the brain, right? It's like saying I'm never going to have an itch again or an ache or a pain. So it's normal to have those feelings. But then we ask, is it becoming a barrier? If it's interfering with your ADLs, your activities of daily life, if you can't get up and do the self-care that is normal for you where you are with your arthritis. So we take this as a mental health professional. When I work with arthritis patients, I say, okay, what was your baseline before this? What's your baseline now? If your baseline hasn't changed, fine. If you can't open a jar, right, all those questions a rheumatologist asks on the form, Can you dress yourself? Can you button on a button? Can you turn faucets? Right? We all love that questionnaire. If that was a problem beforehand, not a big deal. But if you are so foggy or so down or so anxious that you can't do those because your hands shake, or you can't get out of bed, or you can't focus or function at work, then we're looking at, okay, let's get some professional support on board. It may not be long-term. There's this assumption that therapy is, months laying on a couch talking about your mother and your feelings kind of thing, right? That's not the case. A lot of therapy, especially counseling, is designed to be brief and more solution-focused and strength-based. It could be something that, if it's affecting your ability to kind of function day to day or really causing barriers in a specific area of life, it's something that you can talk to a professional and get some tips and tools to address it quicker than you think. So just, looking at the idea of, okay, do I need professional support? Do I need help? Do I need therapy? It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be long-term. There's a lot of different ranges of levels of care and interventions that we have that we can use. Then we look at, do I actually meet diagnostic criteria? So academic and medical terms are really diluted in our everyday language. Think of how many times you may have said, oh my gosh, I'm so addicted to that show. Or I am so OCD, I have to fix this, right? We look at how the medical terms in the language, how we use them kind of casually, it takes away the meaning, because how those words get thrown around just among friends and actually how they're used medically are usually really, really different. So when we use those terms, it really contributes to the stigma, right? When we hear someone say, oh my gosh, I am so ADD, that sounds really negative, right? We don't like that. Someone who has ADHD hears that or has heard people say that and then has that diagnosis, that has a really negative stigma. And it also kind of confuses us as to what's normal adjustment versus clinical intervention. So an example of this we see with suicidality. When people think, if I have a suicidal thought, like I just want to go to bed and not wake up, screw this kind of thought, then we panic, oh my gosh, I can't tell anybody because they're going to think I'm suicidal. They're going to put me in a hospital for 3 days. That's actually not true. It's normal to have those thoughts. Whether or not you have a plan and you have means, right, and you've thought out how you're going to do it, that's a second level. And then an attempt is a third level. So we have to watch how we're using this language because it interferes with people's ability to get care. If anyone watching, if you're thinking, well, I don't want to get evaluated or I don't want to talk to someone because I'm afraid I'm going to have XYZ diagnosis, how you perceive that diagnosis may actually be really different than how the medical and mental health community defines it. So I don't want you to see that as a barrier. When you hear some of this terminology of depression, anxiety, oh, I'm so depressed. It's actually normal if it's like for 2 weeks, like up to 2 weeks, then it's okay, right? So when people say I'm depressed, I'm like, yeah, and that's good. That's okay because you're supposed to have a range of emotion. You're human. You're depressed and you have autoimmune. We're going to talk about some of the medications you're on. Let's talk about your lifestyle and how you take care of yourself. It's normal to feel these things. So even when you talk about, okay, do I need to see a professional? If that, kind of red flag goes up, like, I don't want to do this because I'm afraid I'm going to get diagnosed X, Y, and Z. How you understand that terminology may be very different than how it's actually clinically used. So I want to touch on a couple really quick, just to bust through again some of these myths about diagnosis and some of the terminology. Depression actually encompasses several different depressive disorders. So what they have in common is this presence of a sad, empty, or irritable mood. So notice it's not just sadness. You could feel this emptiness, and irritability is a larger symptom of depression through adolescence than people realize. So teens, early 20s, even into late 20s, irritability can be the first sign of depression. Accompanied by somatic, so it's in your body, and cognitive changes, so how you're thinking and concentrating, that significantly affect the individual's capacity to function. Significantly affect. This is where you get into those barriers. all of the different depressive disorders have differences in terms of duration, timing, and etiology, meaning the cause, where it came from. So we look at major depressive disorder. It has to be at least 2 weeks of duration with what they call clear-cut changes and must meet 5 out of 9 criteria. So a diagnosis of depression is really more involved and intricate than people think, because what we found in previous diagnostic manuals is we were over pathologizing and kind of adding to the stigma a little bit. We want to be able to provide people with a diagnosis because we recognize it unlocks doors to care, right? If you're going to use your insurance benefits, there has to be a diagnosis with it. So we have more room in that. But at the same time, if you're just kind of feeling down for a week or two, that's also just normal. So we don't want to overdiagnose it. Persistent depressive disorder, also known as dysthymia, is a mood disturbance that continues for at least 2 years. So we're talking a much longer time frame. If someone is diagnosed with PDD or dysthymia, then it's usually from some biological chemical imbalance in the brain. Just as we look at insulin for diabetes, for example, imbalances of serotonin can cause depression and anxiety. Similar function. Let's look at the other one, anxiety, right? So people with autoimmune disorders, and specifically arthritis, have rates of depression and anxiety that are slightly higher, significantly higher than the general population. So Gen Pop, we're looking at estimates are anywhere from like 5 to 12% will have diagnosable anxiety or depression. With people with arthritis related conditions, some has estimated as high as like 15 to 20. So it's just know that it's really common, but we understand there's a biological underpinning, especially with anxiety, because pain, if you think of pain as a form of energy, moving up this nerve, we have the pain signal in the brain. It can light up other parts of your brain that can cause this anxiety and cause an adrenaline release. So when we look at anxiety, there are over a dozen different anxiety disorders, all under this umbrella. So the feature that they all have in common is this excessive fear. If you're already kind of edgy or nervous because maybe you're changing biologics or you're going from infusions to shots or you have to switch doctors, that's not excessive. That's normal fear and anxiety. That's okay. We're talking excessive fear and anxiety and related behavioral disturbances. So this means that fear and that anxiety is actually changing your behavior and changing what you're doing. Fear we define as an emotional response to a real or perceived imminent threat. So if you've been a JA kid for a while, and if you had shots as a kid, maybe had methotrexate, went through Humira, Enbrel, some of those medications that had side effects or burned, right? You may have been afraid, but maybe you also had that anxiety, which is the anticipation of the future threat. So we see this a lot with methotrexate. There's a lot of research coming out on methotrexate specifically with fear versus anxiety in children. So if you were that kid that grew up hating the color yellow, you're not alone. You went from a fear of that emotional response to that pain signal, to that anxiety that you knew that was going to happen. Maybe every Sunday afternoon you had to get your shot or take those little yellow pills, where you started to anticipate that fear and act out. That's the anxiety. So we look at those two phenomena. They're different things, even though we use those terms interchangeably, in common language. The anxiety disorders differ in what induces the fear, the anxiety, or the avoidant behavior. So we're trying to avoid something, and the associated thoughts. So when we start to get into differences in those categories, that's what creates all the different diagnoses within the anxiety chapter. And we also have to differentiate from developmentally normal fears and anxiety. So growing up with arthritis, you are growing up with an extra set of developmentally normal fears. I can't emphasize this enough. Being a JA kid who's now a JA never grew up kid, I guess, an adult, and now a JA mom, you have grown up with this extra set of fears that others don't have. And it's normal. It's okay. Other people will get those later on. They'll get that like expansion pack later in life. So our fears about medical intervention, the fears we may have about starting families, changes to our bodies, going to college, changing our schedules and our lifestyles. Those are developmentally normal fears. If you've grown up with arthritis, it's okay. So we have to differentiate that. I've had several arthritis patients and Crohn's patients come to me with all of these diagnoses from other mental health professionals. And I look at it, I'm like, does this fit? Does this make sense? And they're like, well, I don't understand how they expect me not to have medical trauma when I've been dealing with this since I was 5. Yeah, we have to look at what's developmentally normal, and we look at that very individually. So this is why you may feel judged by other people or mental health professionals because they don't understand what this is like. Now that we know the effect of autoimmune on the brain and some of the medication involvement on the brain, we're going to have this extra set of fear and anxiety and even depressive moods, but it's developmentally normal. It's okay. So we have to differentiate when we're diagnosing. Talking to your providers like, hey, yeah, I'm really anxious about this, but just so you know, that's normal for me because of this. It's going to help them put that in context. So as I mentioned with the methotrexate, we look at medications. Medication side effects, come up a lot in conversation. Now, general immunosuppressions, we're not talking about the biologics and the biosimilars. We're not talking about the specific inhibitors, but general immunosuppression, your methotrexate, sulfasalazine, those types of meds, and steroids, so your prednisone, your corticosteroids, those do have mental health related side effects just from the chemistry set itself. So looking at irritability, anxiety, low moods, and difficulty concentrating, those are known documented side effects from those medications. So you can talk to your pharmacist, you can read your drug manufacturer's website for those products, and you'll see it in the fine print. So if you experience an onset of those after you start a med, that doesn't mean that you can't still get support. So I'll get people that come to me and say, well, I don't know what you can do to help me. I can't get off this drug. I'm like, no, you can't. And I'm not telling you, I'm not saying to have that conversation with your doctor. I just want you to know it's normal for being on methotrexate, for example. So let's talk about how we can cope with that and come up with some strategies around that. So you can still benefit from mental health care, even if you are aware that some of your symptoms are directly from medications. It happens. We know this. Some of the psychiatric meds that we see most commonly, the SNRI category. So the S stands for serotonin. The N stands for norepinephrine, and these are neurotransmitters or chemicals in the brain that pass messages to each other and help the brain communicate with itself. Reuptake inhibitor, the R and the I, that's just how it works. So an SNRI, the duloxetine or Cymbalta meds, you may have already been on those because those are actually used off-label for nerve pain. So if you've been through AMPS or fibromyalgia, you may have had experience with these medications already. Traditional SSRIs, also known as antidepressants, also can be helpful to regulate that serotonin. And we also use them, we call them antidepressants because that was the first thing that scientifically we figured out that it worked for. So we just kept calling them that. But we also use SSRIs for anxiety. So they can be helpful to be on, and you can be on them for a shorter duration. It used to be believed that once you're on them for life. So if you know anyone who's been on them for decades, like, oh, I can't ever stop taking this, we actually have research that shows you can be on them 6 months to a year, come back off and see how you're doing. Especially at this age, your brain is changing naturally anyway. We know a lot more about how to prescribe and work with these meds than we did even 10, 15 years ago. And then benzodiazepine categories is another category of medication you may interact with. And those medications are short acting. They are meant for panic disorder. We also use them for seizures. So they calm your nervous system down very, very quickly. So the most commonly prescribed one is Ativan, for example, or clonazepam is another one. So benzos, they may prescribe that if you're having true panic attacks, that might be another option. So just some of the, an intro to some of the medication categories that you might see that we commonly prescribe for anxiety and depression that we use in conjunction with arthritis related medications. So mental health resources, what's out there? What can you do? Peer and social support is so, so crucial. I can't stress it enough. The first time I went to conference was in 2015. My JA kid was 9, and we wanted him to meet other kids because I never met a JA kid like me. I never met anyone my age. I was always in the waiting room with older adults, even as a teenager. Never knew anyone my age with arthritis. And that JA conference in Orlando in 2015, I actually met like other moms my age with arthritis, and it was huge for me. It was so transformational. So it's one of the reasons why we continue to volunteer with conference, because it made an impact not just for my son, but for our whole family. So having that peer and that social support is key. It can really do a lot for that prevention, just to have that sounding board, just to vent and have someone say, oh yeah, me too. Have that echo back can really help. So we don't want to lose that connection with people. Online resources. So we want to look at apps and specifically reputable websites. Now, I never really suggest specific ones just because I'm certified in telemental health. I've been certified since '05. So I've really watched the digital landscape fluctuate. And there are apps that I loved and I trusted, and then they had a data breach and things like that. So I don't give specific recommendations because you really need to look at the fine print, what's going to work for you, what's going to work for your device, because there's just so many options out there now. But looking for specific apps and reading the reviews, especially for the technical stuff and security and privacy, looking for reputable websites. So my biggest piece of advice in this is limiting the use of social media, balancing between personal stories and biased information, because socially, we naturally compare ourselves to other. It's kind of a feature we have because we are by nature pack animals. So we want to compare and see if we fit in with people all the time. Your brain is always doing this. So naturally, when we're looking at social media and we're scrolling through everything, without really thinking about it, we're immediately judging and comparing ourselves. And when you're scrolling through quickly and watching a 10-second video, a 30-second video, a 2-minute video, your brain is going through a lot of comparison, probably a little faster than it can handle. And we don't realize it until all of a sudden we feel like a horrible person, right? So I really emphasize limit the use of social media. Look for reputable websites. Look for things from, the NIMH. Look for your county and state's mental health board resources. Things, look for organizations that have been established, nonprofits, for a specific diagnosis or a specific support group. Do your homework on them, but get your information and your support and your networking from reputable places. Really having an issue with specific social media sites that churn out a lot of quick videos that are meant to get a lot of hits and a lot of traffic, because I'm finding a lot of misinformation about different supplement use, different mental health supplementation, different arthritis supplementation. But when we see it published, we're immediately going to give it a little bit of weight. So just be really careful with your social media use and where you're getting your information, especially in the area of mental health, because it's just an area where it's just the research is changing and just coming out hand over fist, that a lot of information that's still out there is kind of outdated. Just because our science is moving so quickly. So you want to go to reputable sources. Books and journals are always great. I love anything by Brene Brown. I love any kind of self-help positive book, anything that gives you time to reflect. And journaling, even if it is voice journal. I did a lot of talk to text stuff when I was in high school and college because I couldn't write and I couldn't type very well because it was in my hands. I would do a lot of voice journaling just to get it out, because how we process things when we speak is different than how we write, different than how we think. So anything you can do in terms of expressing yourself can really be helpful. So on the professional level, I just want to go through, I know we're already running down on time and I want to have time for questions, but just to go through, to give you an idea of the variety of mental health resources that are out there and help kind of sort through some of this language. So the first kind of basic level of professional is a coach. So coaches are certified, they're not licensed. So there's no state regulation. So they're not focused, they tend to be focused on very specific goals. They don't diagnose or treat, right? So this is specific health coaching. A lot of personal trainers will have coaching certifications, help you with behavior change, not diagnosing or treating. Social workers can be a bachelor or a master's level. They are state licensed, they can diagnose, they can provide therapy, and they're more focused on systems and resources. So a lot of your medical facilities may have a social worker on staff, and you can ask. With counselors, so counselors are master's level only. That's my area. We're licensed, we can diagnose, we can provide multiple types of therapy. We're more focused on wellness and strength-based. So a little bit more of a wellness model approach, a little bit less of a medical model in terms of, okay, what's wrong with you? Versus, hey, how is this affecting your daily life? How can we improve your quality of life? Then we move up into psychologists. Psychologists can either have PhD or PsyD after their name. And if they are clinical psychologists, they are licensed by the state. They can diagnose, provide therapy. Some focus just on cognitive assessment. So if you feel like you're really struggling with the cognitive piece of it, you can reach out and work with a psychologist just to get a full psych eval and a neurocog assessment to give you an idea of how your brain's actually functioning and give you some reassurance. They're wonderful professionals. Then psychiatrists. These are doctors. These either have MD or DO after their name. They are licensed, they can diagnose. They are the only discipline that can prescribe. The exception to this rule is the state of California has a law that some psychologists can go through extra training and become prescribers. But general rule of thumb, the only place you can get meds is from a physician, and that's going to be a psychiatrist, being an MD or DO. Family docs can also prescribe medication, and in many states, you can now find psychiatric nurse practitioners or advanced practice nurse practitioners that are also allowed to prescribe under supervision of an MD. So that's kind of the tier of mental health resources and kind of the levels of care, so to speak. Most people that are dealing with mental health issues related to autoimmune typically start with that master's level social worker or counselor, either getting referred through their physician's office or just finding someone on their health insurance benefits or through an employee assistance program benefit. Most people do really well with that master's level therapist, not really needing to have to escalate to a psychologist or a psychiatrist. So I've touched on some of this already, the expansion of health insurance access. A lot of insurance companies also have added complementary wellness programs. So, pardon my fidgetiness. They've added programs on top of their benefits that you can access for free. That might be maybe self-directed online, or you may be able to talk to a nurse caseworker, for example, to touch base. So you can check into benefits. If you've kind of been on autopilot with your benefits, or if your benefits are through a partner or a parent, see what they have planned for 2022. They probably have added stuff. As a provider that works with insurance companies, every insurance company that I work with upped their benefits in some way or added some kind of complementary package. Community mental health is a great resource. So looking for, starting with your county website or your state website, looking for community mental health centers near you, probably have a sliding scale to make it more affordable. And there are two directories I really love. One is Psychology Today. That is a website. Psychologytoday.com has a free directory where you can put in your zip code and you can click all these other options to find a therapist and get a directory of people. And those profiles, we create those profiles as the providers and we update them ourselves. So it's pretty current. And then OpenPath is a website that will connect you with mental health professionals who have openings for lower cost services. All right, questions. I think I saw a few pop up.
Okay, so before we wrap up, we're just going to take some time to answer a few questions. We're a little short on time, but if you have any extra questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So, Dr. Auslander, I have my first question for you. Is there any guidance for treading the careful line between self-pity and self-care?
Yeah, that's always a line I think we all kind of walk that and go back and forth. Um, it's okay to sit with that feeling. It's okay to be mad. It's okay to be frustrated. I've been there this week in my own flare. I'm in that space where I'm just like, I have too much to do this week. It's okay. You can spend a little time in self-pity. Just don't take up residence there. Have your feelings, let them flow, get them out, be mindful, acknowledge them, and then move on. Part of your self-care can be letting yourself just sit in your feels for a while, right? And just get it out of your system. That's perfectly fine. I actually think that is a form of self-care, but we do have a lot of stigmatizing beliefs about, oh, don't this whole self-pity. Oh, you're just having a pity party, right? You're just wallowing. I'm like, yeah, I'm wallowing and it feels good and I'll come out when I'm ready. So letting yourself have that feeling, it's not a pity. It's letting, being present with those emotions and letting them happen. And then you dust yourself off and move on when you're ready.
Yeah, I think that's great. And really recognizing those emotions and why you're having them instead of, just ignoring them all the time. So, our next question is, given that flares cause stress, what are the best ways to limit being stressed out during a flare? I think this is
Yeah,
the ongoing balance for all of us. It's really tough.
right. I know. I was so relieved. I'm like, at least I'm talking with the Arthritis Foundation tonight because they're totally going to understand why I can't sit still and I can talk about my flare. Um, so we plan ahead for flares, right? We know they're going to happen. We hope they don't, right? We don't like them, but you can make a self-care plan for your flares. So once you get a handle on what your flares feel like, put some things in place. So you've got a plan B at all times. It's really okay. I can now kind of get up in the morning and tell my kids, I'm flaring, and they know right away someone's going to go down and open that peanut butter jar for me. Someone else is going to do the dishes. It's kind of cool. I've got 3 kids that are 16, 14, 12. They are well trained at this point. My husband will, say, hey, what do you need? What can I do before I head to work? Like, what do anything you need? It's just having that plan in place. So when flares happen, you're kind of living, it's a matter of living with this and not against it. So I know that, hey, when I flare, I have support. I just remind myself of my resources. I've got support. I can modify, my day if I need to. I can make a kid do a chore. I can ask someone for help. I can put things off, right? So if you have that plan in place, when a flare happens, yeah, have that crap moment, right? I don't feel good. But if you know what, I've got this. This is my plan. You can also adapt your living space ahead of time. And this is something I noticed particularly when I transitioned from college living to my first actual home. I was so excited that we could go to the hardware store and I could install lever handles on all my doors and not those doorknobs. And my husband just laughed so hard. He's like, oh, so it's not like your dorm? I'm like, haha, thanks for remembering that. And even in my office here, when I took over the space, I changed all of the door handles to lever. So, look through your space. What things can you just adapt all the time that can just stay adapted to make life easier? So when we're not flaring, that's the time to plan and prepare and get those little things in place to make it easier on you. So when you flare, it's not as stressful and doesn't feel like an emergency as much.
Yeah, I love hearing you talk about like your family and how they can help you through a flare, because I think it's really important when you are in a flare to know what you need and what really helps you. I recently moved in with my boyfriend and he doesn't really know how to respond to me when I'm flaring, and I don't really know what to tell him. So just kind of thinking of those things and me telling him, I am going to sleep in this weekend. I do need extra sleep when I'm flaring, and him knowing that he can support me by maybe making dinner once in a while and things like that when I am flaring. So our next question for you is, how do I navigate communicating my COVID boundaries? Since I look young and healthy, some people just don't understand why I'm being so cautious even after being vaccinated.
Yeah, I'm living that reality too. It's okay. I my approach to it is I don't explain. They don't need to know. And if they ask, you can say, it's my choice, right? Or distract the conversation, redirect it. Our 14-year-old daughter has a different autoimmune disorder. She has autoimmune encephalitis. So her brain swells along with her joint pain. And her favorite reaction is just looking at people like they're crazy and going, you do you, boo. Like, why would you ask me that question, right? Like, and you can send that social cue, just be like, really? And not respond or be distracted. You can pretend you didn't hear someone. That's my 16-year-old's approach. It's pretty funny because he's in high school and they're all kind of snarky. He will pretend he didn't hear them and he'll ask them a completely different question just to change the subject. You don't always have to explain. We feel like we have to, like we owe people an explanation, especially in different parts of the country. We're talking about, mask mandates coming down and things changing. We joke in our house, man, we were living this life before it was cool. We had masks and sanitizer, and we were the most popular house in the street because we already had these supplies when COVID hit. We had masks, we were using them. So you don't have to tell anybody anything. You can, play it off. If you have to answer directly, you can just say, hey, this is my comfort level right now, and leave it at that.
Yeah, I think that's a great response. And I actually wrote down what you said during your talk. You had said, you don't need to justify, explain, or excuse anything. And that really stuck with me because it's true. We really don't have to explain ourselves. So question 4 is, what is a good way to recognize when you should get out of a relationship or end a friendship?
Yeah, I touched on that earlier when it is not feeling safe. If you can't be authentic, if that person isn't willing to meet you where you are. I tell my patients, if you're asking that question, you probably know the answer, just aren't sure how to take those next steps and navigate it. But go with your gut, because one of the superpowers that we get from arthritis is having that instinct and that intuition inside a little bit sooner. It's a matter of trusting your gut. So when is it time? When you start to think it's time.
Yeah. And I really liked hearing your story when you said that you had reconnected with somebody from your past, that maybe in that time in your life, it wasn't the best relationship for you, but you can always go back to these relationships at different times when you're in different places. So question 5 is, how would you find motivation to improve your physical health and body image when in a depressed rut?
Right. This is like everybody right now, and it's winter and it's, ugh.
There's no light. It's dark all the time. It's really tough.
It is. A lot of parts of the country, it's just like blah. And one of the subcategories of depressive disorders is seasonal affective disorder. So if you do find you have those winter blahs more than usual, that's a thing. That's not you, that's your brain. We need UV light. We need vitamin D. There are light boxes that you can get that kind of supplement that help. When it comes to motivation, we don't do things that don't reward us. We don't do things we don't like to do. So it's a matter of, what carrot do you need to dangle? Where is your motivation for motivation coming from? If you're pushing yourself and forcing yourself because you're comparing yourself to an ideal that's not realistic, or if you're shooting on yourself, I should be exercising 3 times a week, right? Maybe not. You get that motivation by kind of reconnecting with the purpose. The purpose should be feeling good and feeling connected with your body and giving yourself some grace. A lot of the diet and exercise advice for like the Gen Pop, right, does not apply to us. When I was growing up, the number one treatment approach for arthritis was immobilize the joint and throw a bunch of steroids at it. So much fun. So I spent a lot of my adolescence in and out of physical therapy and quitting sports because I would play and then get injured, play and then get injured in rehab, right? Lather, rinse, repeat. But I still stuck to this kind of mental training. I was a softball player. I was a marching band. I was active. I was fearless. I rode horses. I did all the things. And the second I had rheumatologists tell me you shouldn't do something, of course, I did it. So I would ski and rollerblade and do all this stuff I technically wasn't supposed to do. I was a giant brat. And then fast forward, my now rheumatologist, who has correctly diagnosed me with spondy, explained why I had all those sports injuries as a kid, has really worked with me because I said, look, and again, I am a brat. The medical community did not serve me well for many, many years. So when I went in to finally take care of myself after getting my son stable, I flared really badly in my early 30s, and it spread into my hips and my spine. I finally had to, call it and go see somebody. I said, look, I have no intention on ever not running. I run. I love 5Ks. So that was my attitude. I'm going to do 5Ks. And he's like, okay. And he completely changed my training regimen. And it completely changed how I looked at myself. So I'm like, wait a minute, I really should only train 10 to 15 minutes a day. What? I'm sorry. What's what happened to the 60 minutes, 45 to 60 minutes, 3 times a week kind of thing. And so it's a matter of finding that, what is the purpose? The purpose was to keep me running. Okay, I ran the Jingle Bell Run this past December, and we decided together that was my last timed race. And we found a new workout plan. So my motivation went from being this really rigid, this is what I should be doing, because everyone says I should be working out this way, to setting a specific goal that was for me and not for anybody else. And that's that motivation. When it's lousy, when it's right, we can kind of trigger motivation by finding something novel and interesting. So the same chemical involved in motivation, which is dopamine, is involved in attention regulation. So maybe it could be something as simple as mixing up your activities, trying something new. I have workout videos that I do that are only 10 minutes long. And there's an instructor that I follow who is just flipping hilarious. And I may hate that he's making me do squats for 30 seconds, but the way he's like joking and laughing and the puns, it makes me smile and it makes me come back to see, all right, where's this new video? What's he up to? What's he going to say next? So that motivation when everything is blah and we don't feel right in our body, maybe shift the goal. Maybe the goal is just to do something for myself today. There are days where all I do is I get in maybe 2 yoga poses and that's a win versus the days I can go out and run a mile or 2.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with everything you said. I actually read something the other day that said, nobody motivates you to wash your dishes. And I was like, that's kind of true. Nobody does motivate me to wash my dishes. I just do it. And I kind of then, they were like, apply that to exercise. And I did. And now I'm working out. It's so weird. I don't know what it is, but it's kind of like, I'm working out because I need to take care of myself. It makes me feel better and I don't enjoy it. I mean, I can find something that I kind of like. I mean, I do like my strength training better than my yoga. I wasn't really a yoga person. And everyone can kind of find their spot. And what motivates me to do it is just that it's something I have to do. It's something that I have to do to make my joints not hurt. I have to move. So that's kind of where I find not really my motivation, but just it's another task I have to check off my list.
Yeah.
So oh yeah, go ahead.
Yoga gets thrown at us a lot, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yoga, like it's this running joke. There's a million memes about suggesting yoga to people with chronic pain. But yoga, it doesn't have to be the full practice. There are a lot of really great videos, and the Arthritis Foundation has done some too with modified yoga, and even just pairing a couple poses with a mental intention. So I'm inhaling peace, I'm exhaling anxiety, or I'm exhaling anger. Those kinds of things, thinking blue skies in, gray skies out, just pairing that with the stretch, you can get the brain and the body to tune into each other pretty quickly. So I might do something as simple as a child's pose. You can look that up. I'm not doing it on my couch, but doing child's pose, because with spondy, it's the hips and spine. So I'm in that child's pose and I might be inhaling peace or inhaling strength, and I'm exhaling pain or tension or something that's stuck in my head for that day. And I pair the thought with the breath, and it actually can release a lot of that emotion very quickly.
Yeah. It's funny because actually in my strength training workouts, I do the yoga breathing. I might not be doing yoga, but I'm doing that kind of breathing and that kind of, mental thought process. So we have another question. Do you have any recommendations for coping and dealing with stress related to the unknown and lack of control that accompanies having RA? A lot of people really stress about this, just not knowing what the future is and not being able to control that. It's really tough to not have that.
Yeah, that's where I go. Congrats, you're totally normal. We are actually hardwired to fear the unknown. So it's not the most useful feature of the brain, but anything that we don't know is going to, we don't know what something's going to be like. We don't know when I go somewhere, is there a bathroom? Is there going to be parking? How far am I going to have to walk, right? We are programmed to get a little anxious with that unknown. The way to counter that, when you have something that's going to cause nothing but unknowns, is to just refocus on what's today. Yeah, I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know if I'm going to deal with pain, joint deformity. I don't know XYZ, but this is what I've got today. This is what I know today. It's that mindfulness. It's bringing it back to the present. Yeah, our brains are naturally going to project into the future a little bit to try to protect us, but we don't want to stay there too long because that hasn't happened yet. So when you have that fear and uncertainty, you can, again, sit with it and go, yeah, right now I'm going to acknowledge the fact that I'm nervous about the future. I'm kind of worried, but this is what I have today. And I'm going to choose to kind of stick with my feet in today. Maybe there's some things you can do. This is where the self-care comes in. I'm worried, for example, about losing my mobility. Spondy is not, doesn't have the best prognosis either. But you know what? With that fear, I've got that fear in my mind today. I can spend an extra 5 minutes on yoga and really make sure I am strengthening and lengthening those muscles around my spine. So it gives me a little bit of a sense of control because I'm going to do something positive for myself. That's how we can counter that. You bring it back to the present and then do something that kind of gives back to yourself.
Yeah, that's great. And also having your plan for when you do flare, being prepared and knowing what you need and how to ask for it. All right. So our last question is, where's the best place to find other people my age and in my area who have JA and chronic illnesses? So I think I'm going to take this one, right?
Yep, you take that one.
So I do want to thank Dr. Auslander, though, for all of your time and for sharing all of your experience with us. It's very, very helpful. And I'm sure the entire audience is very grateful for you tonight. But I did want to talk about some of the offerings from the Arthritis Foundation. So I am hosting the young adult session at the Arthritis Foundation conference this summer. I'll be in Orlando in July. Registration is opening in late February. So I would love to see all of the young adults who attended this session come meet me in person in Orlando. We're very excited that we're going to be offering in-person and virtual sessions. So if you can't make it to Orlando, I completely understand if you can't hang out with me in person, but we would love to see you in our virtual programming sessions as well. We also have the Arthritis Champions Scholarship, which is a college scholarship for students with rheumatic diseases. And I can tell you that there are also some travel award scholarship programs as well for the Arthritis Foundation conference. And I was actually a recipient of one of those scholarships my first year as a conference attendee. And now I am hooked and running the session. So highly recommend that you apply for those because there are some great opportunities with the Arthritis Foundation. These are some other resources. We have some other upcoming events. These are the online webinars through the Arthritis website. Our first session is going to be on February 23rd, and it's touch therapies for pain management. And then on March 3rd, we have Chinese nutritional therapies for arthritis. There's also a Live Yes podcast, and then the Live Yes Connect groups and online community. They're in different areas throughout. And then there's also the arthritis.org helpline and the phone number right there. Finally, you have the Insights website on the bottom of your screen, and we would really appreciate if all of the attendees would go and really just provide us your insights and give us that data so this way we can really make effective programming for you. And finally, as a closing reminder, you will be receiving a survey in a couple of days asking about your experience tonight. If you could please fill out this survey completely and honestly, we would really appreciate that, and we will use that information to serve you in the future. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight. Take care.